Yes, my link didn't work. I had to go to Nathan's Zoom email this morning.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I
just
apologize for that.
sorry.
I noticed it right now. For some reason, it's giving me two different passcodes and usernames.
Yeah. So the invitation we had said yes to a day or two ago, whenever you sent it out, didn't work on that synced up with our calendar. So anyway, but your email this morning worked. So thank you.
Okay, so we're going to get started. Before we get into the issues of 1099s we were dealing in the past, we had offered to look at any legal changes we can do to help expedite the process.
Right.
And the administration gleefully accepted. And so we want to hear exactly what you've done. And I don't know when Damien's coming on. He has sent us some language. It seems innocuous enough, and it seems like a common sense approach to speed things up without any harm. So my goal, as long as we do our quick due diligence, is to pass that bill out today and get it over to the House. So, Brittany, you're the only one here who knows more than us, which is not saying much, but.
We hope it means.
The language, so it did give us the extension we needed for the PUA exemption as well, which already exists, but we needed to extend the date of that. So the language extends it to July of 2022. And then the exemption we're seeking now from the tax department is drafted as July of 2021. Giving us a couple of months to not only do our verification now, but there's going to be instances, I imagine, where there's, claimants checking in with us or the tax department that to get us through this tax filing season, it probably makes some sense to just give us that time frame so we don't inadvertently make it too narrow. But again, acknowledging we don't need it for very long.
Okay, I don't know. Do we have access to the language? I've seen it in an email, but is it posted, or Damien, I guess, is not with us to walk us through it?
He mentioned he'd be on about 8:45.
Yeah, but also I thought he emailed it to us. Nathan, is it posted yet on our website?
Yes, Senator, it's posted.
Oh, great. You are divine.
Let me pull that up.
May I just ask, when we talk about tax filing season, tax filing goes through October. So, but for the tax department and VDOL's purposes, we don't think we need it beyond July.
It's hard to know. I don't think so. If there's comfort in giving the exemption through the entire tax filing season, I think that's fine. I think it's a matter of comfort and getting the two departments what they need, but also acknowledging that it's short term. This isn't a long-term fix that we're seeking.
Right.
My question, I wanted to mention a couple of things to the committee and ask you all in terms of timing. I had a meeting yesterday with the governor in the pro tem as kind of part of a check-in, but there was some talk about adding this language into the BAA, and I know that the House is considering and wanting to hear more about it. So in terms of timing,
that would be.
I don't know how you feel about that.
If we vote today to pass out a bill, which I think we would, then I don't think we'd have any objection in just taking that language and moving it faster on the BAA. But I want this committee to take a position on the substance here, and it might be just as easy to vote the bill out, be on notice here. You can just lift the language, and if they want to put it on, we would have to concur when it comes back on the BAA no matter what. So, but let's back up just a second.
Sure.
Now that we have the commissioner here, I don't know which one of you, what are we trying to accomplish with this language? And then we'll get into how long we need it to be on the books, because this is an emergency move for an emergency situation. And I certainly don't, without further testimony, don't want to extend it any more than is absolutely necessary. So just fill us in again what you're trying to do here with this language.
Sure. So I hope the committee was able to get the memo that I sent out yesterday, but just to kind of recap, the intent here is, as we've been trying to increase the validation efforts and quality control processes, we have identified this sort of roadblock in terms of verifying information that the claimants have given to us, and somewhere along the way there was an error, whether it was a typo or most likely it was a typo or some bad information provided, or we transposed it incorrectly. At the call center, there was a point in time where call center staff were helping claimants sign up and putting info in for them. So there's errors that happen along the way. So what we're trying to do is,
I'm just trying to find that memo. What did it?
Oh, it's on. Oh, Brittany's memo.
Yeah.
Is that on the website, Nathan? I don't think so.
It is not. I haven't posted it yet.
I think Brittany emailed it to us yesterday.
Okay.
Is that right, Brittany?
yes.
To the Senate Economic Development. I'll just look for it in box.
Perfect.
A lot. Okay.
I've got the bill. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've got the bill up. That's what I have. So Brittany, your discussion of the intent is
I found the memo.
great.
I have both up.
Great.
Okay, just whoever found the memo, I don't have the pictures up. What time was it sent?
Thursday at 11:41 a.m. I can forward it. I do see everyone's emails in this.
Everyone should have it if they search under Brittany's name.
Just forward it. It'll be at the top of my email. Thank you. Go ahead, Brittany.
Okay. So again, trying to go through a validation quality control process, information that we'd like to correct, kind of out of extra precaution, because we understand that claimants have gone through some hard times right now. We're in the middle of a pandemic. The mailing incident happened. There's a lot more stress and concern. So we'd like to go and do our due diligence and check and verify again. And the information that the tax department has could help us in one step of the validation process. As I mentioned in the memo, we did ask the tax department to run data through their system, but the confidentiality law prohibits us from getting any sort of details or information back. And so that's what we're seeking an exemption to. And I see that Commissioner Bolio is on. So if there's any specifics, I guess, about the tax confidentiality law, I would defer to him. But that's the general overview of what we're seeking to do.
Right.
So is there, I assume Commissioner Bolio and Commissioner Harrington, the purpose of this is to keep tax information as fully confidential as possible. And in this instance, it can serve everyone's interest to make an exception. Is there any, I assume there is, but I'll ask it anyhow. Once the information is in some way sent over to the Labor Department, your release of confirmation or information, is that further held confidentially somehow, or is there any prohibition against the Labor Department or employees of the Labor Department releasing that information they now have access to or confirmation of?
Mr. Chair, once it's tax information, it's tax information. So it would be confidential even when it is moved outside of the tax department in that way.
Okay, and you have, there's a lot of places in state law where you're allowed to share to a certain degree with other agencies information, and this would just be more of the same for a limited period?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, the tax confidentiality statute is very broad and says that everything is confidential unless there is an exception to that. There are some limited exceptions. There's even an existing limited exception for the Department of Labor. However, that only covers data sharing for purposes of verifying an employer or verifying an employer's liability. So not individual claimants.
So in essence, what we're doing here is the department in their due diligence to the Labor Department, their due diligence to fix this problem and to get the verification right that there are no future mistakes, is checking in with your records to make sure they match, to flag where there may be continue to be problems, or if there were problems, they can correct them. And that's what we're trying to do here. And without this, the verification process could be somewhat less robust, or they have to go through some other kind of steps to verify, or they just would not do that double checking.
Yes, that's my understanding. I don't want to speak for the Department of Labor, but yeah, I think so.
Michael's shaking his head, yes.
Yeah, for the record, Michael Harrington, Commissioner, Department of Labor. I would just concur. This is just a due diligence piece, one of many cross checks we'll be performing to ensure that names and socials match up before the 1099s go out the door.
So in essence, this really doesn't speed up the process of what you want to do. It makes it just of a higher quality.
It may speed it up because it can be somewhat automated. So from that perspective, instead of, and I shouldn't say instead of, in addition to manual spot checking of the 180,000 1099s that need to go out the door, this is a way for us to also do an automated full check of the list to to make sure that we can get these out as quickly as possible.
Okay. Is Damien with us yet? He's not. Okay.
I don't see him.
Okay. So can you just tell us, did someone check?
Michael, Randy has a question.
I'm
If
sorry.
you can't see him.
Okay. Yeah. Senator Brock.
Commissioner Bolio, I assume that you've done some sort of a risk assessment as to the what's being asked here. Do you see any risks associated, first, and two, what could go wrong?
I would always see risks when we release tax information. So you can't say that there's no risk, but the Department of Labor is used to handling confidential information. I think that the simplest thing that could go wrong is some kind of mistake in the transfer. So we just want to make sure that we have a very secure transfer set up. We haven't worked out all of the details on that, but there are a number of options. So I don't see this as a high risk move. No. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
I guess just one question is, in terms of being able to manage the data, is there going to be any situation which data is going to be removed from a mainframe and, for example, put in a giant Excel file and moved in that fashion?
I mean, on our side, yes. There's a couple of things that I would say. It's a limited amount of data, right? Because what we are going to be sending is the records that don't match between labor and tax. And that is a subset of taxes data to begin with, right? Because it's only going to be folks who received 1099-Gs from Department of Labor. And even then, it's only going to be those that don't match. Mm-hmm. So we might be talking in the number of hundreds or single thousands of records, right? So it's a much smaller number. Tax is a very robust VTAX system that it's not difficult to run the queries to get this kind of data, run this kind of match, export it, and send it along. So, we've done operationally, how I see this working out is us just sending the detail file of the work that we've already done, right? We've already done this matching work and provided the aggregated numbers. So all I'm going to do is then take that detail file and send it over to the Department of Labor. I actually see very little additional work for the Department of Taxes on this.
I would also add, Senator, that, from our standpoint, this data will only be handled by a few people within the Department of Labor. Again, it's just a validation check to make sure our master file is as accurate as possible. So it's not as if it will be handled across the entire division of unemployment insurance. It will be handled by a select few individuals that will be cross-referencing data points and updating information.
Now, my only concern is not necessarily the loss or theft of data. It's the compounding of error. I gather that one of the reasons we're where we are now is perhaps because of an error using an Excel spreadsheet, which always raises red flags. And now we're using further an Excel spreadsheet to help correct the problem.
I think this one's solid.
I just heard Senator Brock make a really strong pitch again for UI modernization.
Absolutely.
We're ready to advocate for it.
I think just one thing that we've learned too, and I haven't talked about this with Commissioner Bolio, but even just one double check or fail safe in there is when sending an Excel file or a file that can easily be manipulated, also sending a PDF of that file along with it. So that way, you do have it locked in time at some point, so you can reference against the PDF file if we ever needed to just know if there was some mix up, right? So again, I think the risk is very low, but I'm also at this point a strong advocate for double and triple checking information. So happy to also look at that as well.
Thank you. Michael, Damien's with us.
Yeah, I see. I'll let him in.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said you weren't seeing.
I bounce back and forth here.
Okay.
So if you find some mismatch once you get this data, what is the next step? If it's 100 or 1,000 mismatches, did you manually have to contact claimants, or how do you figure out how to get the mismatches to somehow match?
And Brittany, I'll go and then feel free to jump in. I think the biggest piece we're looking for right now is name and social security number. And so that's where we will start. That is the most important match that has to occur. And I think at that point, depending on what those records show, we're not in a position to send out a 1099 if we're unsure about if we're knowingly unsure about the social security number. So I think that number will, like the commissioner said, be relatively small. But if we, for some reason, felt that we didn't have a good grasp on what someone's social security number was, I would see that we would remove that from the file of printed 1099s and have to do some further validation to ensure that we have a 1090 or a social security number that is accurate and correct. And that, again, may be working with the tax department as well as the Social Security Administration.
Thank you. Okay, so Damien's here. I also noticed the auditor's here. Doug, are you here more on the 1099 issue, or do you have any thoughts on this confidentiality question of this new proposal? And also, can the commissioner or Brittany or Damien talk about connections with the ACLU in terms of whether they had any concerns? So Doug, just briefly, I assume you're here for the follow-up on your role in terms of the 1099 audit, and not on this new piece, if you're.
Right.
Okay, thank you. All right, so has anybody talked with the ACLU about any concerns that they might have?
Yeah, I was able to connect with Duff yesterday and talk about the legislative proposal that we were seeking. And I also mentioned to him that we'd be doing another validation process with DMV, which doesn't require legislative change, but I just wanted to mention kind of the various approaches we were taking, as ACLU is really the organization that's, mission driven by confidentiality. So, he mentioned not knowing a whole lot about the 1099 incident, and based on what I was explaining to him as our intent, there was no major red flags. There wasn't any red flags. And he said that he would bring it back to the organization and let me know if anything came up. I haven't heard anything yet. And I feel really weird putting words in his mouth. But that was the takeaway from that conversation. And he understood what we were trying to accomplish, and that, this is data that we should have correct. And for one reason or another, it isn't. And so I think that's an important point too, when we're talking about tax verification. This is information that we should have. We should have it correctly. And so we want to, let claimants know we're trying to get this right to the best of our ability.
Okay. Damien, have you had any conversations with the ACLU or anybody else that might have privacy? Has anybody spoken with the Attorney General's office about this? Okay.
No, I circulated the draft to the members of the administration, but I have not spoken to the AG's office or the ACLU.
Okay.
I think, Commissioner Bolio's legal counsel is an assistant AG. Is that correct? I don't know if that counts. I assume that he could speak on.
That's a good point. I did send a copy of the draft to Will Baker, who's the AAG for the tax department.
Okay. Commissioner Bolio, have you had any conversations with Will about this?
Not on that kind of larger question, no.
Okay. Damien, can you walk us through the bill, especially the effective date sections, but I just want to understand those, but can you just walk us quickly through the bill?
Sure can. You just pull it up here and get started. Great. So the bill will get us past the language here. So what we're doing here is we're modifying the provision here that allows the Commissioner of Taxes to disclose return information to various entities. And with all of these, it's a pretty specific description of when the Commissioner of Taxes can disclose this information. So normally, the Commissioner can disclose it to the Department of Labor for the purpose of establishing the identity or liability of employers for unemployment compensation. So in other words, where the employer is paying out taxable wages and so forth. What we added in the spring is this language from line 5 to line 7, which allows disclosure for the purpose of verifying the earnings of individuals in order to determine the amount of pandemic unemployment assistance they're eligible to receive. These are self-employed individuals who don't have wages in the UI system, so we needed another way to determine their income so that we could figure out a weekly benefit. And then from lines 8 through lines 12, what we've added is for the purpose of verifying and correcting personally identifiable information necessary for the creation and issuance of tax documents to individuals who receive benefits through unemployment insurance and related federal and state benefits programs that were administered by the Department of Labor. So what we've done here is we're focusing it on personally identifiable information that is necessary for creating and issuing those tax documents. So anything that goes beyond that isn't covered by this. And likewise, other return information that doesn't go to that isn't covered by this. And then we focused it on receiving benefits through unemployment insurance. And then because there were so many different related federal and state benefits programs, rather than creating a laundry list, what we've just said is the related federal and state benefits programs that were administered by the Department of Labor. This covers everything from the lost wage assistance from last August and September to federal pandemic unemployment compensation, pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, extended benefits, et cetera. All of these things that have come out in the past year where individuals may have been on different benefits programs throughout the year. So that's this. That would take effect retroactive to January 15th. Section 2, this is what the law will look like on July 1 of this coming year. So it'll now be limited back to the normal purpose of establishing identity and liability of employers for unemployment compensation, and for the purpose of verifying earnings of individuals related to pandemic unemployment assistance. We've left this on the books because given the way the pandemic has run on and pandemic unemployment assistance keeps getting reauthorized at the last minute, we didn't want to be in a situation where pandemic unemployment assistance gets reauthorized on, say, June 1st after the legislature's gone home, and then they can no longer verify the income. The flip side of this is if pandemic unemployment assistance is not reauthorized, this is just language that has no effect because there is no program that that information could be disclosed in relation to. So this is safe to leave on the books because it only applies if there's a pandemic unemployment assistance program. And then Section 3 is how the law will look next July 1st. So July 1, 2022, we get back to the existing disclosure just for the purpose of identifying or establishing identity or liability of employers for UI. So that's basically, think of this as Section 1 is right now, Section 2 is July 1 of this year, Section 3 is July 1 of next. And then Section 4 is just explaining those effective dates there. So B is for Section 1, C is for Section 2, and D is for Section 3. Any questions? Mr. Chair, you're muted.
So the thing we're trying to fix and open up now will be effective from January 1st until July 1st of this year only, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the only general question I have, I think I know the answer, but when you allow the release of this information for the purpose of looking into PUA or cross-checking these things, where does it say in the law that once the Department of Labor has this information and they've got it legitimately, is it just implied that that's the only reason they can use it for? But now that it's in their system, can they start using it for other things down the road?
So there's two pieces in there. One is the existing UI law has extensive confidentiality requirements for the department. So the department is not allowed to disclose unemployment insurance information except for very, very specific reasons. And so there's extensive issues around that or provisions around that. And then the other piece here, I'm just checking the Title 32 requirements around this disclosure. It's not an area of law that I spend a lot of time on. So just bear with me. And if Commissioner Bolio can answer this question quickly, please feel free to jump in.
I'm trying to dig in myself, Damien.
Okay, I'm glad to know I'm not alone here.
Well, we don't need to know the specifics. If you both of you and the Commissioner of Labor feel comfortable that the answer to my question is that even though you gain this information legally under this new law, that you can't use that information for alternative purposes later on.
Yeah, I believe that, let's see. So here we go. It provides here in section 3102, the person or persons receiving such return or return information shall be subject to the provisions of subsection A as if they were an agent of the commissioner. So they're subject to exactly the same restrictions on disclosure as the Department of Taxes, which provides that no present or former officer, employee, or agent of the Department of Taxes shall disclose any return or return information to any person except in accordance with the provisions of section 3102. So any disclosure outside of the provisions of that section is prohibited.
Okay.
And as we said, all of those provisions allowing disclosure are very tightly limited, which is why the Department of Taxes couldn't provide the information right now because of the limitations in that statute. Mm-hmm. And in the UI statute, there's a second backstop, which provides that the Department of Labor can't disclose UI information. And this is a federal and state requirement outside of very, very strictly controlled guidelines there. And that's for example, those guidelines relate to issues around like child support, which is a federal requirement. If you've paid out UI benefits, you have to check to make sure that people aren't delinquent on child support before you pay out those benefits. So, but those are very, very tightly controlled, and I don't see this personally identifiable information being circulated within the scope of the limitations there. It's not like the Department of Labor could start sharing this information out without running into violations of multiple laws at both the state and federal level.
Okay. Are there any other questions from committee members? Senator Rahm.
I guess I'm just trying to make sure I understand. It's just for PUA. And okay, because
so there's two different pieces. The first piece is just for the purpose of verifying income for the PUA program. So that's self-employed people. Basically, it's, let's say that on your form, you basically say, I have average weekly earnings of $500 a week. They then check against your tax returns to make sure that that's accurate.
Okay, so
the second piece is just for the purpose of confirming your personally identifiable information, name, social security number, and address against what the Department of Taxes has to ensure that there's not an issue where, for example, you punch in two numbers wrong on your social security number when you're inputting it. And now they've got a faulty record in there, or your name is misspelled, something like that. So that's the other purpose, and that purpose goes away on July 1 of this year unless the legislature extends it.
The PUA, Senator Rahm, is existing law from the summer. We passed a similar bill in the summer to give access to the earnings under PUA. I'm not exactly sure why it's underlined again, but you probably changed some words there.
Well, it repealed on January 15th.
I got it.
So we have to reenact it. That's why it has to be underlined again. So that was something that we missed going into the session. Both Cameron and I overlooked that date, and so we're getting it reauthorized so that they can continue that, because the program was set to expire December 31st. And if you'll remember, very late in December, that got reauthorized through March 14th. And we're expecting that if another relief package comes out, it'll get reauthorized for another extension, but we don't know what that's going to be at this point.
So what have we been doing since January?
That's a good question. So I don't know, but this is retroactively effective to January. So we're basically providing, if those checks have been continuing, this would be the legislature basically saying it. Our intent was that you could keep doing the checks there. We're making the law retroactively effective so that on the same day the other one expired, we're adding the authorization back in.
So has the tax department been releasing data without authority since January?
I think the commissioner can speak to this, but I'm seeing the head shaking.
We have not, Mr. Chair.
So we just have not been checking to determine the amount of PUA that goes out?
We have not been sending tax data since January 15th, no.
So,
I don't want to speak to the verification that VDOL is doing separate from that, but we haven't been sending that tax data.
So is it, so what, so Commissioner, I don't see the commissioner here. Cameron.
He had to jump off, sorry.
So Cameron, what has the Department of Labor been doing to calculate PUA benefits in the absence of tax data?
From the beginning, based on the federal guidance that we've received, the program is a self-attestation program. So individuals provide us with their quarterly earnings, and in order to receive the weekly benefit amount based on the self-attested quarterly earnings, they have to upload tax documents supporting that quarterly earnings that they've self-attested to. Otherwise, we give them the minimum amount. But at the direction of USDOL and per the federal guidance, it's a self-attestation program. We would like to have this continued capacity to cross-match with the tax department when we come across an instance where we need to do an investigation as a one-off, because there may be a fraudulent claim, or there may be information that we receive that makes us want to dig deeper into a claim, or when we get to the point of wanting to do some really detailed auditing of the program, internal auditing of the program retroactively, to make sure that individuals were attesting correctly to the wages that they were earning. We would need that capacity to check with the tax department.
So we and you and everybody just missed this sunset date.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As Damian mentioned, I mean, the program was set to expire at the end of the year. It was only extended on December 27th, and with everything else going on, we weren't. I wasn't laser focused in on this extension. So
yeah, we were. At least speaking for myself, the focus was on figuring out the good causes for quit and the protections that we've been discussing in S10. Right. So I apologize for missing that.
Yeah. So as Keisha would say, we're feeding two birds with one hand.
Okay. You want to accept that attribution, Keisha?
Well, Allison asked me for an alternative to killing two birds with one stone just yesterday. So
okay.
I'm practicing.
Okay.
It's a lovely image, particularly at 2 degrees.
So what I would like to do, if there are no further questions and nobody has any problems with this, is to vote it out with the understanding that over the weekend and Monday, we will just triple check with the ACLU and the AG that they don't have any problems. I can't imagine they will, but the bill would go on notice on Tuesday, and if we have to either pull it back or have an amendment, we can do that. In the meantime, it sounds like the administration probably would prefer to amend the Budget Adjustment Act with the same language, so it may make everything moot. We may wind up taking it back into committee. Does that sound like a plan to committee members? That works?
Yeah, just to point out, this is drafted as a committee bill.
That's fine.
So it would be introduced on Tuesday with,
All the better.
yeah, so if the Budget Adjustment Act has this language in it, then the committee can just stick this bill to the wall and it doesn't need to move. Otherwise, you can take it up off the, I don't know what the parliamentary term is, but take it up off of notice for immediate action if you need to on Tuesday.
We'll let powers above us decide the procedural moves. I'm all in terms of getting it done as fast as possible. So
I agree. I just like to know, does this mean that the House is looking at this also, because the BAA is obviously in their court right now? Are they reviewing this today and talking about whether to put it in the BAA?
So
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, sorry. You were copied on the emails as well. I believe Secretary Young had an exchange with Representative Hooper. She's looking for some information. I think Commissioner Brolio and I are going to speak with her. I haven't looked at my email. Perhaps there's already something scheduled. And Secretary Young included it in her letter to Representative Hooper in terms of the letter she sends to appropriations on BAA.
Great.
So,
Thanks.
yeah, I think the fact that we vote on it will I think we have some credibility over there. So I think that may give them some comfort and that we've taken testimony. So let's proceed along those lines. We can just do a show of hands. All those in favor of a committee bill along the lines of the draft, exactly the draft that we have in front of us, please raise your hand.
I just want to make sure I understand if there's a formal request here as the clerk, because sometimes the hand raising becomes like a formal record. So Nathan, do you have any thoughts, or Mr. Chair?
I tend to be kind of loose on these things, so I don't know the answer to that. But we have taken a lot of voice votes in this committee and hand votes, and all we're doing at this point is agreeing to sponsor a bill.
Okay.
So it's a committee bill that will be introduced, I guess, read the first time on Tuesday, right, Damien?
yeah, I would record the action. Just make a recording that everyone voted in the affirmative.
Okay.
And then the chair will need to affirm that to the drafting operations team so that they can authorize the printing at this point. So the chair basically says, yes, the committee voted in favor of the bill, and then the bill gets printed at that point. So
I'll work with you, Damien, to check that out afterwards.
Just from a clerical standpoint, who is the reporter of the bill?
I'll report it.
Yeah. For a committee bill, it's usually the chair is the reporter, because it then gets introduced and it might get taken by, for example, finance could request the bill because it relates to tax issues. So there is always that chance. Although in this case, I imagine it would go through very quickly since we have, 3 members of finance on the committee?
2.
So.
Yep. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And Brittany, can you work with Damien to finalize those last 2 pieces with the ACLU and the Attorney General's office? Just get them to send an email or something saying they've looked at it and it looks fine to them. Okay.
Sure, thank you.
Okay. We've got about 15 minutes to move on to, none of you need to leave because it's the same topic. We just, I'll turn it over to Brittany to bring us up to speed as to where things are with the 1099s in general at this point. And this is sort of our periodic check-in on that. So if you don't mind taking a few minutes to do that.
Sure, to be happy to. Thanks for the efforts on the language here. It's really helpful. Recapture mailings, and actually Cameron's on. So if you want to provide more specifics, Cameron, but I'll give an overview. Recapture mailings have gone out. I know the committee has heard from some individuals. Senator, we're getting you a scan if it's not already in your inbox in terms of the envelopes and the return envelopes. There is some frustration from individuals that the return envelopes are smaller than the original 1099 envelopes that we sent out. And I believe most of the committee members saw the email from the commissioner and I last night explaining a little bit more in detail. And I think when those details are provided, it does make some sense. It's less than ideal. But the gist of it for everybody's knowledge is that the original 1099s that went out were in a size 10 envelope. When we did our processing for the recapture, the return envelope that's included is a number 9, which is slightly smaller. We were looking at larger size envelopes and ran into multiple issues. One being we didn't have those envelopes in stock and we would have had to order them, which we were going to do, and that would have taken a couple extra days. But then we got a notice from BGS Print Shop, and the machines they have there are only capable of having an automated process for number 9 and number 10 envelopes. So by the time we had ordered bigger envelopes and had BGS manually stuff over 94,000 letters and envelopes, I think at best we would have been looking at an extra week before we would have had these envelopes out. And given that people are feeling anxious and nervous about having other people's info and their info being out, we wanted to do something timely. So unfortunately, it does require individuals to fold, a rather thick, large envelope up and put it in it's not ideal, and it doesn't look pretty. But given the circumstances, we felt time was a bit of the essence in providing them a path forward to get envelopes back. I believe at this point we have all of the envelopes and letters out to individuals who have received a faulty 1099.
So what happens next? Just walk us through, let's say 50% of the people return the 1099s and 50% don't. What's the next step? I assume it's somehow issuing a corrected 1099 to everybody?
So everybody, regardless of what comes back, everybody's getting a new 1099.
Okay.
We've asked individuals to not move forward with their 1099, even if it looks accurate. Please send it back to us. We're going to reissue. We're going to recheck, re-verify, and get you a new one by the end of the month. And we were talking this morning, and Cameron was mentioning, like, we need to create a plan for when we do get all of these back. And so that is on the list of things to do. But in terms of where that falls in the priority, we haven't figured out that plan yet. But there is some interesting data that we will get back from collecting these forms. And so we will come up with a plan to figure out what we got back and what we didn't.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions, but on that point, quickly, the reissuing of a corrected 1099 is not waiting for any period of time on the return at all, right? That's separate.
No.
Okay.
Correct.
Senator Brahm, I saw first, and then Senator Brock.
One thing that I've heard, and some people emailed me a picture of what they then realized was the FAQ, I think. So I'm just trying to understand, I think the FAQ, some draft of it got mailed to people and it said, and the address to was recipients of 1099 Gs. I think I don't know, because some people sent me a picture of it and said, should I open this or send it back? And I think it ended up being an FAQ, and even they were confused if that was the document or something they were supposed to send back. So I'd be curious if anyone else has heard about that experience, because I wonder, user experience wise, if the 1099 form could say your new 10, I'm worried now people are going to get their correct one and think they didn't get it before, but they might be getting an incorrect one and start to send it back. I think there's some confusion from the outside of the envelope.
Yeah, a couple of things just on that. Sorry, Senator Brock, for your question. We did include a letter with the return envelope that said why you're getting it, what we're asking you to do. And then there shouldn't have been any FAQ. The print shop doesn't even have our FAQ printed out. That
Okay.
I don't even think it was done at the time of the mailing. So that shouldn't have been included.
I'll forward a picture. I'll forward what someone wrote to me. They were like, am I supposed to open this or not? And it was sent to recipients of the 1099-G. So when things get sent out, if the envelope says, this is your new 1099 or something, that might help people, because otherwise, if they didn't get one, they might be thinking, oh, I'm not supposed to open this. I'm supposed to send it back.
Yeah, that's yes, great point. We have talked about BGS is able to print in red at the top of a document, and so we want to make sure we identify the new ones from the faulty ones. So that's certainly a consideration. The last thing I want is for folks to not have received one, get one that's correct, and then think it's the one they should have returned. So clarity on that is front and center for us. Senator Brock, I think.
Randy, did you?
Yeah, I did. Just in terms of, we've talked about the various combinations of error that might be present. Is it at all possible that a person could have gotten a W-2 with their correct name and address on it, but with an incorrect amount to be filed for tax purposes?
Yeah, the 1099, just to clarify, I think you said W-2.
Yeah. I meant 1099, yes.
Okay. It is possible. In a couple of programs, it's possible that a majority of them were likely correct. There were correct information and correct numbers. The trouble is identifying which ones were and weren't at a time when we had people reaching out saying there was faulty. So I don't know, abundance of caution, and to make this as simple to communicate as possible, we just said, everybody, please stop, return it, and we're gonna make sure you have corrected 1099s.
And I would assume that you've done contingency planning to be able to deal with the likelihood that there probably are going to be a relatively large number of incorrect filings based on the 1099 information. Have you considered just what the implications of that are for tax processing?
Yeah, so that's exactly why we wanted to go through these additional validation efforts, especially with tax, because it is possible for them to file taxes with a faulty 1099. As long as their name and the amount that you mentioned were correct, they could file. But at that point, tax is going to find the error. They're going to find the social was a mismatch. And then that process takes longer. And so what we're trying to do here is prevent that scenario from happening more than it needs to. It's still going to happen. I don't want to overpromise that these are all going to be perfect. There are instances where people move and that doesn't get caught or reported, or incorrect birth dates that the state may not have. There's scenarios that will happen where it won't be 100% accurate, but it'll be the best data that we have, the tax department has, and the DMV has to reconcile, and hopefully avoid those extended delays.
Well, I would assume that one of two things would happen is that increased volume would cause further delay in processing this year's tax returns on the one hand, or on the other hand, there would be a need for some additional staffing, at least on a temporary basis. Have you considered the potential need for funding for additional temporary staffing?
I think the department here at Labor is always thinking about that in terms of they're at max capacity for what they need to do. I think that's a better question perhaps for Commissioner Bolio at Tax. They're used to handling many cases like this every year, but I think if we can do our due diligence here in terms of validating our records, it'll save the tax department a lot of work when filings come in. But I don't know if the tax department has had any conversations or considerations about, capacity to do tax filings this year, given the increase in 1099s from the Department of Labor or other benefits that folks might be on.
Well, that may be a question that the committee will want to ask Commissioner Bolio if he's back with us again. Thank you.
I'm certainly happy to ask him that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we leave this topic, what kind of time frame are we looking for in terms of the corrected 1099s going out? And also, we had a conversation last week where we talked about not communicating directly, I guess, with recipients about the ID theft protection services that they will be eligible for, that they would not get confirmation of that until the 22nd of February. And several of us have expressed the concern that can't we do something preliminarily to let people know that that's coming and it's going to be paid for.
Yeah, thank you. We only I only started in the recapture work stream here, but those are two major work streams to provide an update on. New 1099s, we are hoping to have out by the end of the month. Again, this is all based on the several validation processes that we've set up, and we've already received some preliminary data, or I should say the first validation has come back from a company called Veris. We're moving forward with DMV validation, and then hopefully we'll have this exemption language to run that last validation, at least automated validation through tax. And again, there's manual validations and spot checks along the way. So again, by the end of the month. In terms of the ID theft protection, we are on a timeline to have that mailing go out Thursday. We have done a press release, a direct claimant letter, have posted the information on our website, I believe, and we'll do another couple of daily emails, which we can remind folks about these services that are being provided. So late last night, we were able to give the final go-ahead on the mailing list and the letter that's going to go out to claimants. And so the vendor's on track to have the mailing go out Thursday.
What's that, the 19th? Or 17th? 17th?
It's the 18th.
18th.
Okay. Okay, so it's a few days earlier, and there's some preliminary word that's gone out to let people know that they're getting these services. Okay. Anything else you want to share with us before I move to the auditor?
I think those are the major updates.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you all very much.
Doug, do you know anything more about what your charge is or what you're planning to do in terms of how to proceed and what you hope the bottom line you're trying to get to?
Yes, indeed. We met with
You're,
and his.
We can't hear you, Doug, very well.
Is that better? That's interesting. I have it, my volume is almost all the way up. Can you hear me now?
Not particularly well.
Curious. My volume is all the way up. There's nothing else I can do. I'm sorry.
okay, all right.
Okay, go for it.
We met with the commissioner and his team last week. My folks have met with CLA twice. They have agreed upon objectives and a timeline. We're going to split this into two objectives. The first being to identify the scope and cause of the error. We expect to have a report by the end of March. The second objective will be to identify opportunities for long-term improvement for internal control and quality assurance, and we expect that by the end of April.
That's great. I really like the last piece. We're big fans of trying to get modernization monies and changes at the department. So anything you see there that strikes you as unusual, please let us know or make sure it gets into the report. Even, it may be outside the charge of this particular problem, but please don't hesitate to mention other things you see in terms of modernization needs.
I will certainly mention it to the team. Thank you.
Okay. Hard to hear you, but I think we got what we need. I mean, you answered the questions that I asked, but if you had anything else to add, please do so. It is hard to hear you, but we'll have you back in a week or so anyhow, or a couple of weeks to get any kind of midstream report.
Well, I apologize about the technical problem. I'll check it out and see what I can do.
Okay.
The other thing is that we have spoken with the fifth floor about budget and related issues, because we've got to work this out somehow, but it's no big deal.
Okay. Any questions for the auditor? Okay. Let me see. Thank you, Doug, for coming and hanging in there. We're at our break time. We were going to talk about S10, and I think we have for about a half hour, but I think we've run over by a lot. So I'm pulling up the agenda here. I think people need a break. Let's
We were
okay.
going
Let's
to move.
we had till 10 o'clock. Okay, we have until 10.
Right.
Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back with the Department of Labor and we'll get into charge relief and S10 for a half hour or so. Okay, so 9:45 back and we'll soldier on, as Senator Clarkson likes to say.